The file on my desk was thin, but the weight of it felt immense. The client was a 6-year-old boy, Leo. The presenting issue, according to the intake form filled out by his father, was oppositional behavior and emotional believed to be stemming from a volatile home environment with his mother. My eyes scanned the clinical, damning phrases: maternal instability, parental alienation, unfit. It was a classic, high-conflict custody case, the kind that always left a trail of scorched earth, with the child caught in the middle of the fire. My job was to be the neutral party, the expert observer, to evaluate the child, speak with the parents, and provide an objective, clinical assessment that would be used by the court. My job was to find the truth. I closed the file. My 10 o'clock appointment. The father's name was Damien, a common enough name. My heart gave a small, illogical flutter of anxiety, a muscle memory of pain. I took a slow, calming breath, the kind I so often taught my own clients. I was Dr. Corinne Reed, now, respected, detached, the woman I had been before, the woman with a different last name. A different life was gone. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Dr. Reed, your 10 o'clock is here." "Thank you, Clara," I said, my voice smooth and professional. "Send them in." I stood, adjusting the blazer of my suit. My office was my sanctuary, carefully designed to be calming for children. Soft colors, comfortable chairs, a shelf filled with therapeutic toys and art supplies. It was a safe space. Today, it felt like a battlefield I hadn't known I was walking into. The door opened, and time seemed to stop. He looked older. The lines around his eyes were deeper, but he still had the same dark, handsome, confident air that had once charmed me and later suffocated me. He wore a suit that cost more than my car, his hand resting possessively on the shoulder of the small boy beside him, Damien, my ex-husband, and beside him, his small hand clutching a toy dinosaur, was my son, our son, Leo. Eyes, wide and brown and so much like my own, scanned the new room with a child's natural curiosity. Then they met mine. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. He knew me as Mommy, in jeans and a sweater, with my hair in a ponytail. He didn't know this version. Dr. Reed. My entire world tilted on its axis. The air in my lungs turned to ice. The professional detachment I had cultivated for years shattered into a million pieces, and all that was left was the raw, primal terror of a mother. But my face remained a perfect, serene mask. I had become a master of the mask. Damien had taught me that. He, on the other hand, did not recognize me at all. Why would he? I was Dr. Corinne Reed now, not Corinne Allister. I had gone back to my maiden name after the divorce. I wore my hair differently. I had lost the sorrowful weight that had clung to me during our final years together. To him, I was just the best damn child psychologist his money could buy. The one whose expert testimony was going to be the final nail in his ex-wife's coffin. "Dr. Reed," he said, his voice dripping with the smooth, practiced charm he used to manipulate the world. He extended a hand. "Damien Allister, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard wonderful things." I took his hand. It was like shaking hands with a snake. His skin was warm, his grip firm. "Mr. Allister," I said, my voice a miracle of calm. "And this must be Leo." I smiled down at my own child, a warm, professional smile that felt like a scream on the inside. "Hello, Leo. My name is Corinne. This is my office. It's a place where we can talk and play and draw." Leo looked from me to his father, his small face uncertain. "Go on, son," Damien urged, giving his shoulder a squeeze. "The doctor is here to help us. Help us." The audacity of it was breathtaking. He had brought my own child to me, to have me certify him as a victim of my supposed instability. He hadn't just handed me a weapon. He had handed me the entire armory. A memory, sharp and brutal, flashed behind my eyes. The courtroom, Damien on the stand, his face a mask of sorrowful concern. "I love Corinne," he had said to the judge, his voice breaking just so, "but she's fragile. Since the death of her mother, she's been prone to bouts of depression, of emotional outbursts. I'm worried about her being alone with Leo. I'm worried about his safety. Her fitness as a mother is questionable." He had taken my grief, the most profound pain of my life, and twisted it into a weapon to be used against me. He had painted me as a hysterical, unfit woman, all while his lawyers filed motion after motion to drain my finances and my will to fight. I had survived it, barely. The joint custody arrangement was a bitter pill, but it was all I could manage. But now I knew he wasn't going to stop until he had everything, until he had Leo all to himself. I led Leo over to the small table and chairs in the corner. "Why don't you have a seat, Leo?" I said gently. "You can draw me a picture, if you like. You can draw anything you want." He picked up a blue crayon and began to draw. I sat with him, my back to Damien, giving my son my undivided attention. The first session was underway, and the game, the real game, had just begun. "You have to drop the case." Clara's voice was firm, her face pale with shock. We were sitting in her law office, a place that had become a sanctuary for me during the divorce. Clara had been my lawyer, and had since become my closest friend. "I can't," I said quietly, stirring a sugar I didn't want into my coffee. "You have to," she insisted, leaning forward, her voice dropping. "Corinne, this is a conflict of interest so massive I don't even think there's a legal term for it. If he finds out who you are, it won't just be you he destroys. He will ruin your practice. He will have you disbarred. He will use this to prove every single lie he's ever told about you being unstable and manipulative. He will take Leo from you, and this time, it will be for good." Everything she said was true. The risk was astronomical. The logical, sensible thing to do was to call Damien's office, claim a personal emergency, and refer the case to another psychologist. I should run from this situation as fast as I possibly could. "He doesn't recognize me, Clara," I said. "I've changed. And he never truly saw me anyway. He only ever saw a reflection of himself, an accessory, a possession, the name, the hair. I'm just an expert he's hired. For now," she said, exasperated. "What happens when Leo goes home and says, 'Mommy, I met a doctor named Corinne today, and she looks just like you'? What then?" "He won't," I said. "I've already thought about that. In the office, I am Dr. Reed. At home, I am Mommy. We will play a game, a secret game, just for us, about my special work friend, Dr. Reed. Children can hold those kinds of dual realities easily. Leo is smart." Clara stared at me, her expression a mixture of fear and awe. "You're actually going to go through with this?" "He came to me for an expert evaluation," I said, my voice hardening, the memory of Damien's courtroom performance fueling my resolve, "and that is exactly what I am going to give him. For 2 years, he has built a narrative of my unfitness based on lies and fabrications. He's whispered his poison to teachers, to other parents, to the court. Now, he has unwittingly given me a front row seat to his own methods. I will be there to document the impact of his manipulation on our son. And my notes will not just be the scribbles of a frantic mother. They will be the clinical, impartial, expert testimony of Dr. Corinne Reed, the very testimony he is paying a fortune to acquire." It was no longer just about revenge. It was about survival. It was about protecting my son using the only weapons I had left, my mind, my training, and Damien's own breathtaking arrogance. The second session was apparent. Consultation, just me and Damien. He sat in the chair opposite my desk, the picture of a concerned, heartbroken father. "It's just so hard, doctor," he said, his voice heavy with false sincerity. "I try to co-parent, I really do. But his mother, Corinne, she has a way of making everything so difficult. She's emotional, volatile. One day she's fine, the next she's weeping over something that happened years ago. Leo gets caught in the middle of it. He's a sensitive boy. He needs stability." I listened, my face a perfect mask of empathetic neutrality. Inside, a cold, silent rage was building. I made a note on my legal pad. "Father presents as caring and concerned, but uses sophisticated language to pathologize the mother's behavior. Potential for parental alienation should be monitored." "And how does Leo seem, after he's spent time with his mother?" I asked, my voice gentle. "He's often withdrawn," Damien said, shaking his head sadly. "Or he acts out. Last week, he threw a toy and broke a vase. He never does that when he's with me. It's her influence. She's making him unstable, too." The vase, I remembered. Leo had called me, crying, right after it happened. He had told me he was angry because Daddy had been on the phone for an hour, promising to play with him, but never did. Damien had yelled at him. Now, he was twisting the story, using it as evidence against me. My pen moved across the page. "Father reports incident with vase. Note. This conflicts with child's own account of the event. Father appears to be reframing child's legitimate, emotional reactions to fit his desired narrative of maternal incompetence. At the end of the session, Damien stood up, looking relieved. "Thank you, doctor," he said, shaking my hand again. "I feel so much better having someone like you on this case, someone who can finally see the truth." "I assure you, Mr. Allister," I said, meeting his gaze, my professional mask firmly in place. "My only goal is to provide a thorough and accurate assessment of the situation." He smiled, a satisfied, confident smile. He had no idea. That night, after I put Leo to bed, I sat at my desk at home and opened a new file on my computer. It was locked with a level of encryption that would have made Liam proud. At the top of the page, I typed, "Assessment Report, Leo Allister." Below it, I began to transcribe my notes from the sessions. Every lie he told, every manipulation, every subtle twist of the truth, all of it, documented with the cold, clinical, unimpeachable authority of a state-licensed child psychologist. He wanted an evaluation. He wanted a report. He thought he was commissioning the weapon that would destroy me. The fool. He was paying me to write his own confession. I looked at the screen, at the beginning of the document that would be my salvation and his ruin. "The evaluation is underway. Damien and I will be exceptionally thorough." The tightrope was thinner than I could have imagined. At the office, I was Dr. Reed, a calm, neutral observer in a world of clinical data and therapeutic toys. At home, I was Mommy, a loving parent in a world of bedtime stories and scraped knees. But the line between the two was blurring, and the fall would be fatal. The first real test came after our third session. I was tucking Leo into bed that night, his small body warm and pliant under the dinosaur-patterned comforter. "Mommy," he asked, his voice small in the dim light of his room. "Yes, sweetie, why does Dr. Reed look like you?" The air left my lungs. It was the question I had been dreading, the one Clara had warned me about. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. But my voice, when it came, was soft and steady. "This was just another therapeutic intervention." "That's a very interesting question, Leo," I said, stroking his hair. "Does she look like me?" "A little bit," he conceded, in the eyes. "Well," I said, leaning in conspiratorially, "I have a very big, very important secret. Can you keep it?" He nodded, his eyes wide with a child's love for secrets. "Dr. Reed is my secret work friend," I whispered. "And because my job is helping kids, you and I are playing a secret game to help her. When you're at her office, she's Dr. Reed. But when you're here with me, she's just my friend. And what we talk about there is part of our secret game. It's our special mission. Can you do that?" "A secret mission," he breathed, his face lighting up. "The most secret mission of all," I confirmed. It was a dangerous, ethically dubious manipulation, and it was the only thing keeping my world from imploding. The sessions became my primary source of data. In my office, behind the safety of my professional mask, I watched Damien's lies bloom, and I watched my son navigate the fallout. I brought out the sand tray, a shallow box filled with fine, white sand, and shelves of miniature figures, people, houses, monsters, trees. It was a tool for children to build their worlds, to tell stories without words. I had used it with hundreds of children. I had never used it with my own. "I want you to build a world for me in the sand, Leo," I said gently. "Any kind of world you want." Damien sat in the observation chair in the corner, a silent, judgmental presence. He thought he was watching his son provide evidence against me. He had no idea he was watching his own undoing. Leo's small hands went to work. He built 2 houses, placing them on opposite sides of the sandbox. One house was neat. He put a mother figure and a child figure inside. They were playing with a dog. Our dog, Buster. The other house was different. He put a father figure inside. Then he picked up a female figure with long, blonde hair and a shiny dress. He hesitated, then placed her in the house with the father. Then he took one of the monster figures, a snarling, spiky creature, and half buried it in the sand right outside that house's front door. "Can you tell me about this world?" I asked, my voice soft. "This is my house with Mommy," he said, pointing to the neat little scene. "It's fun. And this one," I prompted, gesturing to the other house. "That's Daddy's house," he said. He looked down at the sand. "And that's Isabel." Isabel, the name of Damien's new girlfriend, a woman I had only seen in glossy photos online. "And who is this?" I asked, pointing to the half-buried monster. Leo's voice dropped to a whisper. That's the noisy monster, he said. He comes when Isabel's friends are there. They drink grown-up juice, and the music gets loud. Daddy says I have to stay in my room. But the monster is loud and I can't sleep. I looked over at Damien. His face was a thundercloud. He had been telling the court that his home was the bastion of stability and quiet routine. Leo, in the innocent, irrefutable language of play, had just told me it was a place of late-night parties and monsters. I made my notes. Child utilizes sand tray to depict two distinct home environments. Mother's home is associated with play and safety. Father's home is associated with a noisy monster, suggestive of anxiety related to loud noises and adult gatherings, potentially indicating an unstable or chaotic environment. Isabel, father's new partner, is present. Every word was a stone, building the wall of my defense. Damien's confidence, however, remained unshaken. He believed he was in control of the narrative. In our next parent consultation, he leaned forward, his expression one of earnest collaboration. Doctor, he began, I want to be completely transparent with you. I want you to have all the information. I've been keeping a log of Corinne's erratic behavior, texts, emails. I think you should see them, so you can understand what I'm dealing with. He slid a folder across the desk. It was filled with printouts. My own words, twisted and taken out of context. A panicked text I'd sent when Leo had a fever, framed as me being hysterical. An angry email I'd written after he'd missed a custody exchange, framed as me being aggressive. It was a carefully curated collection of lies. Thank you, Mr. Allister, I said, my face a mask of professional gratitude. This is very helpful. I took the folder. He thought he was giving me ammunition against myself. In reality, he was giving me a priceless look at his playbook, and he had just given me an idea. A communication log is an excellent therapeutic tool, I said, my tone thoughtful. I think it would be beneficial for you both to use a court-approved communication app going forward. It keeps everything in one place. It's all documented. It will help minimize conflict and misunderstanding. He beamed, seeing it as a way to entrap me further. A brilliant idea. Dr. I'll have my lawyer file the motion immediately. He had no idea he had just agreed to create an official, time-stamped record of his own manipulations. Every lie, every excuse, every passive-aggressive comment he made from this day forward would be logged as evidence. My evidence, I made a note as he left. Father has agreed to utilize a court-approved communication application. He presents as cooperative, but this tool will serve as a useful, objective measure of his communication patterns. Moving forward, the tightrope was still there, but I was learning to dance on it. The introduction of Isabel was Damien's next strategic move. He brought her to the next session, presenting her as a key figure in Leo's life. She was exactly as I'd pictured her from the sand tray figure, tall, blonde, dressed in expensive, minimalist clothing. She was a perfect accessory for Damien's perfect life. Isabel has been such a wonderful, stabilizing influence for Leo, Damien announced, his hand resting on her back. I thought it was important for you to meet her. Isabel offered me a warm, polished smile. Dr. Reed, it's a pleasure. Anything I can do to help little Leo, I'm here for it. Her warmth didn't reach her eyes. My professional assessment kicked in immediately. Affect is congruent but appears performative. I spent the first part of the session observing their interactions. Isabel was a skilled performer. She laughed at Leo's jokes. She praised his drawings, but she never truly connected with him. Her hands never ruffled his hair. Her eyes were always aware of Damien, watching for his approval. She wasn't connecting with the child. She was playing the part of good stepmother for an audience of two, Damien and me. When Damien stepped out to take an urgent phone call, a move I suspected was deliberate, to give her a chance to work on me. Alone, Isabel's demeanor shifted. She leaned forward, her expression turning confidential. Woman to woman. You know, she began, her voice a soft purr. I feel for you, having to deal with his ex. I've heard she's a real piece of work, completely unstable. Damien is a saint for putting up with it for as long as he did. It was a classic triangulation tactic. An attempt to create an alliance with me, the expert, against the faceless, crazy ex. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I simply nodded, my face impassive, and made a note. Father's partner, Isabel, uses consultation time to disparage mother, despite having never met her. This suggests she is an active participant in the parental alienation narrative, but Damien's biggest mistake was yet to come. In our following session, he informed me of his next move. I've taken the liberty of speaking with Leo's first-grade teacher, Mrs. Gable, he said, looking pleased with himself. I felt it was important for her to be aware of the situation at home, so she can keep an eye on him. I've asked her to prepare a small report on his behavior in class, which I'll be happy to forward to you. My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression neutral. He was expanding the battlefield, trying to recruit more soldiers for his army of lies. It was a dangerous, aggressive move, and it was a fatal error. Thank you for letting me know, Mr. Allister, I said calmly. As the court-appointed evaluator for this case, it is standard practice for me to speak with all relevant parties, including school personnel. I'll reach out to Mrs. Gable myself to schedule a consultation. The flicker of panic in his eyes was instantaneous and deeply satisfying. He had assumed he could control the flow of information from the school. He never imagined his high-priced expert would do her own due diligence. The call with Mrs. Gable was everything I had hoped for. At first, she was cautious, clearly influenced by Damien's charm. Well, she began, Leo is a very sweet boy, very bright, but he can be sensitive. Mr. Allister mentioned there were some difficulties at home with his mother. I didn't contradict her. I just used my training, open-ended, non-leading questions. Tell me about his sensitivity. When do you notice it most? Well, she said, pausing to think. Now that you mention it, it's usually on Mondays. He's often very tired on Mondays, after a weekend with his father, and he can be a bit anxious. Anxious, I prompted gently. He worries, she explained. Last week he told me he was worried because Daddy's friend, Isabel, told him that if he misbehaves, his mommy might not be able to see him anymore. The room swam for a second. The monster from the sand tray wasn't just noise, it was threats. And academically, I asked, my voice tight. Oh, he's wonderful, she gushed, her tone shifting. One of my best readers. His mother has clearly spent a lot of time with him on his literacy skills. He's a joy to have in class, a very happy, well-adjusted boy, apart from those tired, anxious Mondays. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. I had it, a respected, impartial third-party witness. A witness who had just, without realizing it, completely dismantled Damien's narrative and corroborated my own deepest fears. He had tried to add a brick to his wall of lies, and he had handed me a battering ram instead. I opened the encrypted file on my computer. My fingers flew across the keyboard, documenting every single word of my conversation with Mrs. Gable. Each sentence was another nail. Thank you for the suggestion, Damien, I thought. A cold, grim satisfaction settling deep in my bones. The teacher was most informative. The phone call with Mrs. Gable had shifted the ground beneath my feet. I was no longer just collecting evidence of his lies. I had independent, third-party corroboration. My secret report was no longer just a mother's desperate counter-narrative. It was becoming an ironclad professional assessment. It was time to pull on the first thread. In our next consultation, I sat across from Damien, my face a study in thoughtful, clinical concern. Mr. Allister, I began, my tone gentle. I've had a chance to synthesize my initial observations from our sessions with Leo. One recurring theme appears to be a notable increase in his anxiety levels preceding his transition times back to your care. His smile tightened. It was a small, almost imperceptible change, but I saw it. Anxiety, he repeated. I would have said excitement. He loves his time with me. I'm sure he does, I said, nodding placidly. But children often express complex feelings in ways that can be misinterpreted. The noisy monster he described in the sand tray, for example, is a powerful metaphor. It suggests his sense of peace is being disrupted. It might be beneficial to explore the consistency of routines in both households, particularly regarding bed and exposure to adult social events. I had fired a warning shot, wrapped in the soft velvet of therapeutic jargon. I hadn't mentioned the teacher. I hadn't mentioned the parties. I had simply used Leo's own words back at him. Damien's mask of charm cracked for the first time. A flash of genuine hostility flickered in his eyes before he could suppress it. Are you suggesting, doctor, he said, his voice dangerously smooth, that the problem is with my home? I was under the impression we were here to discuss his mother's instability. We are here to discuss whatever impacts Leo's well-being, I replied evenly, my pen moving across my notepad. Father exhibits defensive, hostile reaction when presented with feedback that contradicts his established narrative, attempts to redirect focus back onto mother. This suggests a rigid cognitive style and a low tolerance for views that challenge his own. My only concern is for the child. He recovered quickly, leaning back in his chair, a placating smile returning to his face. But the seed of doubt had been planted. He now knew I was not the simple, easily manipulated tool he had intended to hire. The pressure made him reckless. A few days later, Leo came home from a weekend with his father, clutching a brand new, leather-bound scrapbook. "Look, Mummy," he said, his eyes bright. "Daddy and Isabel made this for me. It's my adventure book." I sat with him on the sofa as he turned the thick, glossy pages. It was a work of art, a piece of propaganda. Page after page of professionally shot photographs of Leo, Damien, and Isabel, engaged in a series of wholesome, lavish adventures. Leo, at a pony riding lesson. Leo, on a sailboat. Leo laughing as he and Isabel baked cookies in a sun-drenched, immaculate kitchen. Every photo was perfect, too perfect. The next day, Damien brought the scrapbook to our session. He placed it on the table between us with a triumphant air. "I thought this might be helpful for your evaluation, Doctor," he said. "A visual record of the stable, enriching environment I provide for my son." "Thank you," I said, my voice neutral. "Perhaps you could walk me through it." I then turned to Leo. "Leo, why don't you tell Dr. Reed about your adventure book?" Leo, eager to please, began to narrate. And with the innocent, devastating honesty of a child, he dismantled the entire fabrication, picture by picture. "Oh, that's when we went sailing," he chirped, pointing to a photo of them on a yacht. "But I had to wear my puffy jacket all day except for the picture, 'cause Daddy said the picture wouldn't look like summer if I wore it." He turned the page, and here's us baking. Isabel let me stir 2 times, and then she said I had to go play because I was making a mess, and her friend was coming to take the pictures. He pointed to another, a photo of him and Damien at a zoo, Leo grinning from ear to ear. "This one is my favorite," he said. "Isabel told me if I made a super-duper big smile for the camera, she would buy me the big Lego set, and she did." I kept my eyes on the book, my face impassive. But inside, my fury was a physical thing. They weren't just creating a false narrative. They were actively coaching my son to participate in it. They were teaching him that love and affection were transactional, that smiles could be purchased. I made my notes. Father presents a scrapbook as evidence of family stability. Child's own account reveals that events were highly staged for photographic purposes. Indicates that affection and material rewards are being used to coerce desired behavior from the child. For the purpose of manufacturing evidence, the scrapbook wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed to see inside the lion's den. At the end of the session, I looked at Damien, my expression one of deep professional consideration. "Mr. Allister," I said, my tone decisive, "given the conflicting reports and the complex dynamics at play, I believe the next logical step in this evaluation is to conduct 2 home visits. It's standard practice in high-conflict cases. It will allow me to observe Leo in each of his natural environments and assess the parent-child interactions firsthand." I paused. "I'd like to schedule 1 visit at your ex-wife's home this Tuesday, and 1 at yours on Thursday." The color drained from his face. The charming, confident man was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He knew, just as I knew, that he couldn't refuse. To refuse a home visit from the expert he himself had hired would be a massive red flag to the court. He was trapped. "Of course, Doctor," he finally managed to say, his voice strained. "Whatever you think is best." The first home visit was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. I rang the doorbell of my own home, and waited on my own porch to be let in. Damien answered the door, stepping aside to allow me to enter. He was an intruder in my space, acting as the host. "As you can see, Doctor," he said with a condescending sweep of his arm, "it's clean, a bit small, perhaps, but clean." I ignored him. "Hello, Leo," I said warmly, as my son ran to the door. He stopped short of hugging me, his eyes wide as he remembered our secret game. "Hi, Dr. Reed," he said, a little wobble in his voice. My heart broke. I spent an hour in my own home, playing the part of a stranger. I commented on the child-friendly layout. I observed Leo's comfort level in his own bedroom. I watched as Damien subtly pointed out flaws: a crack in the plaster, a slightly worn armchair. I documented it all with cold, Clinical detachment. Father uses mother's home environment to continue his narrative of inadequacy, focusing on socioeconomic differences rather than the child's emotional well-being. The visit was an agonizing theatrical performance, but we survived it. 2 days later, I drove to Damien's penthouse apartment, the Lion's Den. The doorman announced me, and I was sent up to the top floor. The apartment was spectacular, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. It was also cold, sterile, and utterly devoid of personality. It looked like a luxury hotel suite. Isabel greeted me at the door, a vision in cream-colored cashmere. "Doctor, welcome," she purred. "We're so thrilled to have you." The entire apartment was staged, immaculately clean, vases of fresh flowers, the scent of lavender in the air. On the coffee table was a stack of parenting books. It was a performance, and I was the audience. I asked Leo to show me his room. He led me down a long, white hallway to a room that looked like it had been lifted from a catalog, a designer race car bed, a shelf of brand new, expensive toys, still in their boxes. There were no crayon drawings taped to the wall, no scuff marks, no signs that a child actually lived here. "This is my room," he said, his voice small, while I was kneeling down, asking Leo about his new toys. I heard them, Damien and Isabel, whispering in the hallway. They thought I couldn't hear. But my hearing had become preternaturally sharp these last few months. "Stick to the plan," Damien hissed. "Don't offer her anything unless she asks. Just be natural." "I am being natural," Isabel whispered back, her voice sharp. "This is ridiculous. Why is she even here? Collusion. Coaching." I kept my face turned towards Leo, my expression unchanged. Parents observed engaging in whispered conversation, indicating a pre-planned and coordinated performance for home visit. "Leo," I said softly, "do you have a special place where you keep your favorite things?" His face lit up. "Yes, my secret box." He dragged a small wooden box out from under his bed. He opened it with a flourish. Inside were his treasures: a smooth gray rock, a bottle cap, a broken toy soldier, and a small foil packet. A blister pack for prescription medication. There were 2 pills missing. My blood turned to ice. I recognized the name on the packet. A powerful, fast-acting sedative, an adult sleeping pill. "What's this, sweetie?" I asked, my voice miraculously steady as I pointed to the packet. "Oh," he said, picking it up matter-of-factly, "that's Isabel's sleepy medicine. She takes it when the noisy monster comes so she can sleep. Sometimes she leaves it on the table by the big couch." My mind reeled. Negligence. Child endangerment. Leaving prescription medication within reach of a 6-year-old child. This changed everything. This was no longer about lies and manipulation. This was about my son's physical safety. With my back to the doorway, my body shielding their view, I took out my phone. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely operate it. I opened the camera, held my breath, and took a single, clear photograph of the pills in my son's treasure box. The click of the shutter was silent. I spent another 20 minutes at the apartment, my mind a maelstrom of cold fury and terror, my professional mask cemented to my face. I thanked them for their time. I complimented their beautiful home. I walked out, got in the elevator, and rode it down 30 floors in a state of suspended shock. It wasn't until I was sitting in my car, parked a block away, that the mask finally fell. The cool, calm, collected Dr. Reed vanished, and all that was left was the mother. A single, hot tear of pure, undiluted rage rolled down my cheek. The game was over. My report was no longer just a shield to defend myself. It was now a sword, and I was ready to use it. The drive home from Damien's apartment was a blur. My professional composure had shattered the moment I closed my car door, leaving behind a mother seized by a cold, protective fury. The image of that blister pack of pills in my son's treasure box was burned into my mind. This was no longer a game of psychological chess. Damien had not just lied. He had not just manipulated. He had, through his arrogance and his choice of partner, allowed my son to be placed in direct physical danger. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my computer, the glow of the screen illuminating my face in the darkness. The encrypted file was open, and I wrote. My fingers moved with a furious, clinical precision. This was not an act of revenge. I felt no satisfaction, no thrill of victory. This was a professional duty. an ethical obligation. I was a doctor, and I was documenting a disease. I integrated everything. The initial intake form, where Damien had laid out his fabricated concerns, my session notes detailing his patterns of manipulation and pathological blame shifting, my analysis of the Santray, where Leo had given a name to his fear, the transcript of my conversation with Mrs. Gable, a testament to Leo's well-being in my care and his anxiety after weekends with his father, the damning, innocent quotes from Leo about the staged adventure book, the overheard conversation during the home visit, a clear indicator of collusion, and then, the final section, child endangerment and negligence. I described the home environment in Damien's penthouse, the lack of a lived-in, child-friendly space, and I described the discovery of the prescription medication. I embedded the time-stamped photograph I had taken, a clear, undeniable image of adult sedatives in a 6-year-old's toy box. My conclusion was stark, professional, and brutal. The father, Mr. Allister, has constructed a narrative of maternal incompetence that is not supported by evidence. In fact, observations suggest that the father's own behavior, his choice of partner, and the environment of his home present a significant risk to the child's emotional stability and physical safety. The presence of unsecured prescription medication constitutes gross negligence. It is my professional recommendation that the mother, Ms. Allister, be granted sole legal and physical custody. It is further recommended that the father's visitation be limited and professionally supervised until he has completed a comprehensive parenting course and a psychological evaluation of his own. When I was finished, the sun was beginning to rise. The report was 37 pages long. It was a fortress, unassailable. I met Clara at her office at 9 a.m. I hadn't slept, but I felt a strange, wired clarity. I handed her the printed report. She read it in silence, her expression shifting from professional interest to surprise to shock. When she got to the final section about the pills, she let out a sharp, audible gasp. She looked up at me, her face pale. "Corinne," as she whispered, this is more than a custody report. You know what this means, don't you?" "I do," I said, my voice steady. "As a state-licensed psychologist, you're a mandated reporter," she said, her lawyer brain kicking into high gear. "You have a legal and ethical obligation to report suspected child endangerment to the authorities, not just to the court, to Child Protective Services." This was the point of no return. The moment the private war became a public, official act, this would trigger an investigation that would go far beyond our custody hearing. It would brand him, follow him, and change the course of his life forever. "I know," I said. "I'm making the call as soon as I leave." "Here," she nodded slowly, a look of fierce pride in her eyes. "Good, this is airtight, he's done." I went back to my office, my heart a steady, heavy drum. I attached the finalized PDF to an email. I sent it to the court mediator, to Damien's lawyer, and to my own. The act of pressing send felt small, anticlimactic, but I knew I had just detonated a bomb. Then, I picked up my desk phone, looked up the number, and made the second call. I spoke for 15 minutes, my voice calm and clinical, as I filed an official report with CPS. The first explosion came 2 hours later. A frantic call from Damien's lawyer to Clara, full of blustering threats and accusations of bias. Clara told me he sounded like a man drowning. Then, silence. For the rest of the day, an unnerving, tense silence, until 9 o'clock that night. I was washing the dishes when my personal phone, the one I hadn't used to speak to him in months, began to ring. The screen lit up with his name, Damien. My hands were wet. I dried them slowly on a towel. I took a deep breath, and I answered, "You bitch." His voice was not the smooth, charming baritone he used on the world. It was a raw, guttural scream of pure rage, the voice of the monster from the sand tray. "What did you do? What the hell did you do?" I remained silent, letting him vent, letting the poison drain out. This was the real Damien, the one I had lived with, the one I had fled. My lawyer just called me. He yelled, his voice cracking with fury. He said Dr. Reed's report, the one I paid for, recommends I get supervised visitation. Supervised? Like I'm some kind of criminal. "She's trying to ruin me. I'll destroy her. I'll have her license. And you put her up to this, didn't you? This has your pathetic, manipulative fingerprints all over it." He was ranting, spiraling, completely unaware. He was a king screaming treason in his castle, having no idea the walls were already gone. He still thought we were two separate people. He still saw me as the weak, unstable ex, and Dr. Reed as the rogue professional he could sue into oblivion. And CPS, he shrieked. They're opening an investigation. All because of what that lying, incompetent doctor wrote in her report. My lawyer says I'm going to be destroyed by what's in that report. My own expert witness. He finally paused to take a breath, his rant exhausted. The silence hummed with his rage. Now, it was time. I took a breath. My voice, when I spoke, was not the voice of his ex-wife. It was the calm, measured, clinical tone of Dr. Reed. Your pattern of escalating aggression when presented with information that contradicts your personal narrative is noted. Damien, I said. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could almost hear the gears in his mind grinding to a halt. The shock, the confusion. What? He stammered. What did you just say? I said, I repeated, my voice clear and precise, that your hostility is a predictable response. As I detailed on page 27 of my assessment, you demonstrate significant narcissistic traits, including an inability to accept accountability and a tendency to project blame onto others. A strangled, choking sound came through the phone. He knew, in that instant, his entire world, his entire understanding of the past 3 months, was the two women he had been fighting against, the weak victim and the powerful expert, had just merged into one. His nemesis. It was you, he whispered, his voice hollow with dawning horror. Dr. Reed, it was you. Yes, I said, it was me. And as a mandated reporter, after discovering evidence of gross negligence and child endangerment in your home, I was legally and ethically obligated to contact Child Protective Services. You did this to yourself, Damien. You were so obsessed with proving I was an unfit mother that you never stopped to consider if you were a fit father. I heard a sharp intake of breath, then nothing, just the dead air of his utter and complete defeat. I didn't need to hear any more. I ended the call. The rest was a formality, a flurry of legal activity. Faced with the CPS investigation and the irrefutable, damning report from his own hand-picked expert, Damien's case crumbled. He withdrew his motion. He agreed to everything. I was granted sole legal and physical custody. He was granted supervised visitation, twice a month, pending the outcome of the investigation. It was an absolute surrender. There was one final session booked in my calendar. Leo Allister, 10 a.m. I almost canceled it. But I knew I needed to close the loop, for him. He came into my office and sat at the little table. Dr. Reed, he said, looking at me expectantly. I knelt down in front of him, so we were eye to eye. Leo, I said softly, I have something to tell you. Our secret mission. It's over. You did a wonderful job. You were so brave. And we won. We won, he asked, his eyes wide. We won, I said, a real smile finally reaching my eyes. And Dr. Reed has to go away now, but it's okay, because from now on, it's just me, just Mummy. His face broke into a radiant, relieved grin. Just Mommy, he repeated. He threw his arms around my neck and hugged me tight. I held my son, in my office, in the space where I had fought for him, and I felt the last of the ice around my heart finally melt away. Months later, the air was warm and smelled of freshly cut grass. Leo was chasing a soccer ball across a wide, green lawn, his laughter echoing in the afternoon sun. I was sitting on a bench, a sketchbook in my lap, not with clinical notes, but with a drawing of a new playground I was designing. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Clara. CPS investigation closed. Case filed. He's taking the parenting classes. Don't worry, he won't be a threat anymore. I texted back a simple thank you, and put the phone away. I watched my son play, happy and safe and free. The war was over. The ghost of Damien's narrative was gone. I had faced the monster, not with rage, but with truth. My truth. And in doing so, I had not only saved my son, I had saved myself. The future was no longer a battle to be won. It was just a park on a sunny day, a blank page, and peace. A quiet, simple, and extraordinary peace. For years, after winning her freedom and protecting her son, Corinne has built a new life of peace and success. But her manipulative ex-husband, Damien, is a patient predator. Having completed his court-mandated therapy and regained unsupervised visitation, he begins a subtle and insidious campaign to poison their now 10-year-old son's mind against her. Corinne soon realizes she is in a new, more dangerous war. One fought not with reports and evidence, but for the heart and mind of her own child. Peace had a texture. It was the rough, satisfying grain of a charcoal pencil against drafting paper. It was the cool, smooth surface of a freshly potted ceramic planter. It was the warmth of my son's hand in mine as we walked through the Park. My firm had just won the contract to redesign. For 4 years, peace had been the foundation of the world I had rebuilt. Leo was 10 now, a bright, funny, and deeply empathetic boy, with a lanky frame and the same curious brown eyes as mine. The secret game we had played was a distant, hazy memory for him, folded into the narrative of a time when Mummy and Daddy weren't getting along. The raw trauma had been smoothed over by years of stability, love, and quiet. Damien had, against all my expectations, played his part. He had completed the parenting courses. He had undergone the psychological evaluation. He had attended his supervised visitations with a humbling, quiet compliance. A year ago, the court had granted him unsupervised weekend visitation. He had, on the surface, been a model of reformed behavior. He was polite during exchanges, flexible with schedules, and always spoke of me to Leo with a tone of detached respect. The monster had gone dormant, and a foolish, hopeful part of me had begun to believe he was gone for good. The first tremor of the new war was almost imperceptible. Leo came home from a weekend at his father's gleaming, sterile apartment, and as I was making dinner, he said it. "Dad says his place is lonely without me," he commented, flipping through a comic book at the kitchen counter. "He said it's not a home like ours is, because it's just him." "Well, that's nice of him to say," I replied, my focus on chopping vegetables. "Yeah," Leo continued. "He said he wishes he could have a home like this, but he had to sell the big house we all used to live in because the divorce was really expensive for him." My knife stopped moving. The comment was so subtle, so expertly crafted. It wasn't an attack. It was a statement of sorrow, designed to elicit pity. It painted Damien as a victim of circumstance, and me, by extension, as the circumstance. "Well," I said carefully, resuming my chopping, "divorces are difficult for everyone, sweetie. The most important thing is that you have 2 homes now where you are loved." "I know," he said, but his voice was thoughtful. The seed had been planted. Over the next few months, more seeds were sown. Leo returned from his weekends with new, sophisticated vocabulary. He started talking about Damien's emotional journey and his efforts at personal growth. Damien was weaponizing the very language of therapy I had forced him to learn. He was building a new narrative, not for the courts, but for an audience of one, our son. The first real crack in our piece appeared on a Sunday night. Leo was supposed to be doing his homework, a diorama of a rainforest ecosystem. I found him staring blankly at the wall, his shoulders slumped. "Everything okay, honey?" I asked, sitting on the edge of his bed. "Dad says you worry too much," he said suddenly, not looking at me. "He says that's why you always need to know my homework is done on Sunday nights. He says it's your and she." He sounded out the word carefully, a word no 10-year-old should be using to describe his mother. A cold dread spread through my chest. This was more than just planting seeds. This was a direct assault. Damien was reframing my love, my care, my simple, responsible parenting, as a symptom of a psychological flaw. The same flaw he had tried to use to take Leo from me years ago. He was fighting the old war on a new front. "It's not anxiety, Leo," I said, my voice calm and even, though my insides were churning. "It's called being a parent. It's my job to make sure you're prepared for the week, just like it's your job to do your homework. Dad helps me with my homework at his place," he mumbled, a new, defensive tone in his voice. "He doesn't check it 3 times. I knew then that I was in a fight I didn't know how to win. I had no report to write, no court to appeal to. Damien was doing nothing illegal. He was just talking to his son. But his words were poison, and I could see it starting to work. "It's parental alienation," I told Clara, my voice tight with a rage I hadn't felt in years. We were sitting in my office at my firm, the plans for a new public garden spread out on the table between us. Forgotten. It's a classic, sophisticated campaign. His positioning, himself as the fun, enlightened parent and me as the anxious, controlling one. Clara sighed, her legal mind immediately seeing the chessboard. "And it's impossible to prove. He's not violating the custody agreement. He's not endangering the child, not in any way a court would recognize. He's just being a manipulative asshole. There's no law against that. So what do I do? I asked, feeling a familiar, helpless desperation. I can't sit back and let him turn my own son against me. I can't show Leo the custody report. It would traumatize him, seeing his father described in those terms. You're right, you can't, she said. You can't fight this with facts and evidence, Corinne. This isn't a legal battle. It's psychological, and you are the expert in that field. Her words struck me. I had been thinking like the victim, the mother under attack. I had forgotten that I was also the strategist, the doctor. But my old methods, covert, observation, secret reports, were useless here. My subject was not Damien anymore. It was Leo. I didn't need to prove Damien was a liar. I needed to empower Leo to see the truth for himself. That evening, I didn't press Leo about his homework. Instead, I sat with him and started a new conversation. You know, I began casually, words are funny things. People can use them to build things up, like we do with our park designs, or they can use them to knock things down. He looked at me, intrigued. And sometimes, I continued, the most important thing isn't the words people say, but the things they do, actions. Have you ever had a friend promise to come over and play, and then they didn't? Yeah, he said. Mark was supposed to come over last week, but his mom made him clean his room. And how did that make you feel? Bummed, he admitted. Right, because his actions didn't match his promise. It's important to pay attention to that. With everyone, it helps you know who you can really count on. It was the first lesson. The first tool in a new kind of toolkit I had to build for him. Not a toolkit of anger or resentment towards his father, but one of critical thinking and emotional intelligence. The first real test of this new strategy came a month later. Damien had promised to take Leo on a special camping trip for his birthday. Leo was vibrating with excitement for weeks. He packed his own bag. He practiced tying knots. The day before the trip, Damien called. I answered on speakerphone so Leo could hear. Corinne. Damien's voice was a mask of deep regret. I'm so sorry. This massive, unavoidable work crisis has come up. I have to fly to Chicago tonight. I have to cancel the camping trip. I saw Leo's face fall, his eyes filling with tears. My heart ached for him. Just terrible timing, Damien continued. Please tell Leo I'm so sorry and I'll make it up to him. You know how it is. When you're running a business, sometimes you have to make these difficult choices. His words were, for me, another subtle dig about my smaller, less important career. We hung up. Leo was trying very hard not to cry. The old me would have been furious at Damien. The new me saw an opportunity. I'm so sorry, sweetie, I said, wrapping him in a hug. I am so disappointed for you. I let him be sad. I validated his feelings. Then, after a while, I asked the question. What did we talk about? I said gently. About words and actions. He sniffled, wiping his eyes. He promised, Leo whispered. And then he didn't do it. Exactly, I said. And it's okay to be disappointed and even angry when that happens. It tells you something important about the promise, doesn't it? He nodded. Later that evening, I was checking my email when I saw it. A notification from Isabel's flashy Instagram account. A new post. It was a photo of her and Damien, clinking champagne glasses, tagged at a high-end resort in Cabo, not Chicago. My first instinct was a surge of white-hot rage. I wanted to print it out, to show it to Leo, to scream, see, he's not just disappointing, he's a liar. But I stopped myself. That was Damien's way, the path of poison. My path had to be different. I closed the laptop. Leo didn't need to see the picture. He already had the truth. He had felt the sting of a broken promise. That was real. A photo from Cabo was just petty data. My job wasn't to make him hate his father. It was to make him resilient to the disappointment. To make him the unimpeachable expert on his own life. The war had changed, and so had the definition of victory. In this final conclusion, Corinne commits to her new patient strategy of psychological inoculation, teaching her son Leo to see the truth, not through her eyes, but through his own. As Leo's emotional intelligence grows, he begins to recognize the cracks in his father's charming facade, leading to a confrontation that Damien never anticipated. Faced with a son he can no longer manipulate, the long war for Leo's loyalty reaches its quiet, powerful climax. forcing Corinne to finally share the truth of their past and bringing the entire saga to its definitive, peaceful end. My strategy was a slow, patient form of gardening. I couldn't just rip out the poisonous weeds Damien was planting in Leo's mind. That would tear up the soil. Instead, I had to enrich the soil itself. I had to give Leo the nutrients he needed to identify the poison on his own. Our conversation shifted. We started analyzing the characters in the movies we watched and the books we read. "Why do you think the king said that to the hero?" I'd ask. Was he being honest? Or did he want something? How could the hero tell the difference? I was teaching him subtext. I was giving him a vocabulary for manipulation, without ever mentioning his father's name. Slowly, I began to see it working. The tools were taking root. Leo came home from a weekend visit one Sunday, and instead of being quiet or defensive, he was thoughtful. "We were supposed to go to the new science museum," he said, sitting at the kitchen table. "Dad was talking about it all week." "Oh, that sounds like fun," I said, keeping my tone light. "We didn't go," he said, looking at his hands. "His friend called, and we went to a brunch at a hotel instead. Dad called it a networking opportunity." He said the words like they were foreign. He looked up at me, and his eyes were clear, not with disappointment, but with a kind of dawning understanding. His words and his actions were different again, Mom. My heart ached with a mixture of pride and sorrow. I was so proud of him for seeing the pattern. I was so sorry that he had too. "They were," I said softly. "Thank you for telling me that." Damien, meanwhile, began to sense the shift. He was a master of control, and he was losing his grip. His usual methods, the lavish gifts, the subtle digs at me, the promises of a more exciting life were no longer having the desired effect. Leo, armed with his new critical thinking skills, was becoming immune. When Damien would try to blame me for a scheduling conflict, Leo would simply reply, "That doesn't sound like Mom," with a finality that offered no room for argument. The frustration mounted in Damien, and one weekend, it finally boiled over. The carefully constructed mask of the reformed dad slipped, and Leo got a glimpse of the man I had divorced. He came home on that Sunday evening pale and quiet. He went straight to his room. I found him lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling. "Hey, sweetie," I said gently, sitting beside him. "Tough weekend." He was silent for a long time. Then, his voice small and trembling, he said, I asked him why he never comes to my soccer games. My heart clenched. Damien hadn't attended a single game all season. He got mad, Leo whispered. His face got tight. He said I was being ungrateful for all the other things he does for me. He said I was starting to sound just like you. He turned to look at me, his eyes filled with a terrible, hurt confusion. He yelled, "Mom!" His voice was so loud. He looked like the monster from my old sandbox. There it was. The final, necessary piece of data. The one I could never have given him. His own, first-hand experience. Damien, in his frustration, had finally shown his true colors. He had scared his own son. The time for subtlety was over. The gardener had to become the storyteller. My son needed the truth, and for the first time, I believed he was strong enough to hear it. "Leo," I said, my voice soft but firm, "can you come sit with me on the sofa? There's something we need to talk about. Something important." He followed me into the living room, his movements hesitant. We sat down, and I took his hands in mine. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "What your dad said to you was not okay," I started, "and his anger was not your fault. Do you understand that?" He gave a small, uncertain nod. "You asked me once why your dad and I really got divorced," I said, my heart pounding. "I think you're old enough to understand a little bit more of the story now." This was the most important therapeutic intervention of my life. I had to be honest, but I had to be careful. I couldn't destroy his father in his eyes. I just had to explain the danger I had protected him from. A long time ago, when Grandma passed away, I was very, very sad. I began, "It was a hard time for me. Your father, instead of helping me through my sadness, he tried to use it. He was afraid of losing you, and he made some very bad choices because of that fear. He tried to convince a lot of people that my sadness made me a bad mommy, so that he could have you all to himself." Leo looked up at me, his eyes wide, listening intently. "He told lies, honey," I said, the words heavy but necessary. "And he did some things that were not safe. Do you remember we talked about how my most important job is to keep you safe? He nodded. Well, I had to do my job. I had to prove to a judge that our home was the safest place for you, and I did. The secret game we played, with Dr. Reed. That was part of how I kept you safe. It was my way of showing the grown-ups the truth, without ever having to put you in the middle. I took a deep breath. Your dad isn't a bad person, Leo, but he was a very unhappy person who made bad, selfish choices. And I am so sorry that his choices hurt you this weekend. He was quiet for a long time, processing everything. Finally, he looked at me, and the confusion was gone, replaced by a new, solemn understanding. So when he gets mad like that, he said, that's one of the bad choices. Yes, I whispered, my eyes filling with tears of relief. That's exactly right. The victory was not a lightning strike in a courtroom. It was a quiet conversation on a Sunday night. It was the dawning of understanding in my son's eyes. The change in Leo was profound. He was no less loving to his father, but he was no longer a sponge for his father's poison. He had boundaries now, forged in truth. The final test came a few weeks later. Damien called to arrange a weekend visit. I listened from the other room as Leo spoke to him on the phone. Hi, Dad, he said, his voice clear. Yeah, I can come over Saturday. But remember, we talked about the movie. Is that what we're really going to do? Because it's okay if you have other plans, you just have to tell me the real plan. There was a pause. Leo listened, then said, okay, and Dad, please don't talk about Mom when I'm there. I don't like it. It makes me feel bad. He paused again. Okay, I love you too. See you Saturday. He hung up the phone and came into the living room. He looked at me and gave me a small, confident smile. In that moment, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that we were going to be okay. He was no longer a pawn in anyone's game. He was his own person. Damien didn't stop being Damien, but his power was gone. His manipulations were met with the calm, simple clarity of a child who had been taught to trust his own reality. He had lost his audience. He was a king with no subjects. All he could be now was a father. Years from now, there will be more conversations, more difficult truths. But the foundation I had built for Leo, the one Jocelyn had tried to steal and Damien had tried to poison, was now made of something stronger than my protection alone. It was reinforced with his own resilience, his own wisdom, his own truth. I stood on the balcony of my office, looking out at the city lights. The plans for a new children's discovery garden on the screen beside me. The long war was over. I had survived the courtroom, the psychological warfare, the shadowy threats, and the battle for my own child's heart. And the peace I felt now was not the fragile, quiet peace of a ceasefire. It was the deep, resonant, and unshakable peace of a war truly won.